The office of sheriff has existed over 1,000 years and is the oldest law enforcement position in the U.S. The word sheriff is derived from the shire reeve, which hails back to England, where the land was divided into geographical areas called shires, and each shire selected a reeve, or guardian of the shire, eventually leading to the word sheriff as we know it today. In the United States, the rich history of the sheriff first began in Virginia in 1634 and in Louisiana in 1803, when the U.S. acquired the Louisiana-Missouri Territory. At that time, the governor appointed sheriffs, and it was not until 1847 that the office of sheriff became an elected position in Louisiana. Thomas Jefferson believed that the office of sheriff was the most important of all the executive offices in the country, saying, "There is no honorable law enforcement authority in Anglo-American law so ancient as that of the county sheriff." As our country grew, the importance of the role of sheriff did so as well. In the 19th century, during the gold rush and cattle drives, America expanded westward, and lawlessness reached an all-time high. This lawlessness continued during the Great Depression, and southern states were not immune. Louisiana sheriffs had it out with gangsters and thieves in some of our nation's earliest examples of real-life cops and robbers. One of the most infamous duos, outlaws Bonnie and Clyde, were killed in 1934 on a rural road in Bienville Parish by a posse including Bienville Parish Sheriff Henderson Jordan, his deputy Prentice Oakley, and several Texas officers. While keeping the peace is still a critical function of the sheriff, the role of sheriff today has evolved into that of an administrator of multifaceted criminal, civil and tax, correctional, and social services operation, often serving as one of the largest employers in the parish. Today, Louisiana's sheriffs serve 4-year terms with unlimited tenure. Unique to their nationwide counterparts, Louisiana sheriffs are the chief law enforcement officers, the chief executive officers of the court, and the official tax collectors for the parishes in which they serve. What makes a Louisiana sheriff unique? He or she has more constitutional authority and responsibility than any sheriff in the 50 United States.
Our main goal in this public service announcement pertaining to the role of the sheriff is to make citizens in the state of Louisiana aware of what we do as sheriffs, aware of the functions of the office that we do on a day-to-day basis for you.
The sheriff has always seemed to me that the sheriff is more responsive, a little bit closer to the people. He has to be elected every 4 years, and therefore he goes out and makes sure that his deputies are responsive to the needs of his constituents. And so the title of sheriff and just the presence of a sheriff, to me, it seems like it's just a little closer to the people, an elected official, and we're there to serve and help all the people in the parish. Even though you have the city police and you have other entities that help, the sheriff in my parish and most all parishes are still the one that people will call when they need help with their family member, when they need help with their elderly person, or they have a juvenile that's giving them problems, or they just got an issue about their ad valorem taxes or whatever. They want to usually talk to the sheriff, and sometimes in our situation, they don't want to talk to an assistant. They want to come and see the sheriff.
In Louisiana, we're the only sheriffs that are ex officio tax collectors. We're the keeper of the jail. We are the civil processor, where we conduct sheriff sales and foreclosures. We are the officer of the court, where the judicial system can operate in a safe and appropriate manner. We collect fees, we disperse these fees, and frankly, there's no room for margin of error. You can't have any error omissions in that regard. So it's important, I would think, that you would look at a Louisiana sheriff in a far broader view than just the most obvious, which is a chief law enforcement officer. And clearly, that's the one that most our constituents identify us with. But it is much broader than that, and much more important, frankly, for the electorate to find a sheriff, that man or woman, that can, frankly, surround themselves with with the talent to do the array of responsibilities that a sheriff has.
When they see this star right here, I want them to feel, especially the youngsters, that this is somebody that I know that can help me, not somebody that is going to be a detriment to me or do harm to me. So when you see the police car or you see a unit with that symbol, with that star, then I want them to feel these are some people who are going to take care of my problem.
There's a big difference between a sheriff's department and the office of sheriff. The office of sheriff, created by the Louisiana Constitution and clearly throughout the country likewise, is one that requires 6 or 7 major duties and responsibilities. And the important distinction I would offer is that a Louisiana sheriff and the office of the Louisiana sheriff has a connotation of independence and a sovereign nature. When you talk about a department, there is some suggestion that it is a subordinate to a government, and that's clearly not the case with Louisiana sheriffs.
Today, sheriffs in Louisiana serve 4-year terms with unlimited tenure with many roles. He or she is the chief law enforcement officer of the parish. The sheriff is the CEO of the court. He or she is responsible for maintaining the safety and security of the court, take charge of juries when outside the courtroom, service of court papers such as subpoenas, summons, warrants, and civil process and prisoner extradition. The sheriff is the official tax collector of state and parish ad valorem taxes and other taxes and license fees as provided by the Louisiana Constitution. Policing, prosecution, corrections, probation, civil proceedings. A major responsibility of the sheriff is to maintain the parish jail. The sheriff also operates many programs for the citizens such as community outreach, seniors, triad, neighborhood programs, DARE, sex offender, victim notification, emergency response, JTF 7, SWAT, communication towers post-Katrina. The Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness offers a seat at its table during emergencies. Recruiting, hiring, and training deputies is another area the sheriff has the responsibility. Louisiana has 64 sheriffs, 1 in each parish. Let's look at some of these important responsibilities.
One of the most important jobs that we do as sheriff is house not only local prisoners, but state inmates for the state of Louisiana. So we have in Calcasieu Parish about 1,200 inmates, probably about 350 are state inmates. And the rest are prisoners from Calcasieu Parish who are either awaiting trial or have been sentenced and are waiting either to be shipped off to DOC. But it could be, we are the central jail for not only the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office, but all our local municipalities throughout our parish. You have to feed them, you have to house them. The medical expense, although that comes from the parish, they give us money back for that, for housing these prisoners. We still have to hire, for my particular jail, you're talking about 250, almost 300 deputies to operate a jail for that size. So, it is a big financial obligation, not only to the sheriff, but to the taxpayers of our parish.
As far as the financial pressures, they are huge. In which the state gives or allots $24.39 per offender. And what that has to accumulate as far as the housing, as far as the medical of an offender, as far as the feeding of a prisoner, and as far as paying for the guards that actually sit and actually manage the offenders there in the facility. So it gets to be kind of tough as far as a sheriff as far as managing jails. We provide the standard living as far as an offender to try to rehabilitate that offender to go back into society.
We teach these inmates, just basic life skills, how to do an interview to go for a job, how to balance a checkbook, how to dress. A lot of these people, when they've been in jail 8 or 10 years, they either didn't know or they forget what it's like on the outside. So we try to prepare them to go out into the public and be a productive citizen. And it's worked very, very well. I did an average on the 3 prisons that we have, and it cost me a little over $35 a day. to keep an inmate in those facilities. The state reimburses me a little over $24 a day. I believe it's $24.39. So I'm losing $10, $11 a day on every inmate that I have. But when you compare that to the service that they provide, you know, I think it's a deal that we can get by with that. On your pretrial inmates, that's the guys that's sitting there at the courthouse waiting for their day in court. I only get $4.75 a day to keep them, so that's a losing proposition there.
Our goal is, if we can get them some way of training to get them a job when they get out and try to get them some help with most of their issues or drug or alcohol issues, then maybe, you know, we can help our problem ourselves by trying not to, you know, for them not to come back to our facilities.
Sheriffs work closely with the State Department of Public Safety and Corrections.
Two things, really, two distinct things that we do with the sheriffs. One is house state prisoners at the local level. The other is emergency operations and what we do during hurricanes, floods, emergency situations at prisons and those sort of things. And in the 80s and 90s, the state couldn't afford to build prisons, couldn't afford to house inmates in our state prisons in the sense of the cost that was involved. There was no capital outlay, no finance money to build prisons. And the sheriff stepped up at that point and became partners with the department and critical partners to the department. And just to say that we really couldn't do without the sheriffs and their relationship that we have with them. So, you know, we've grown into that relationship. We've sort of outgrown ourselves to some extent in that we have 50% of our prison population, over 50% of our prison population, which today is about 19,000 offenders at the local level. So we've grown from 4,000 to 19,000 at the local level. And the issue with that is that the ones at the local level, not only are they 19,000 being housed, but discharge-wise, we discharge about 15,000 every year back to our communities, and 11,000 of those are coming out of our parish jails. We've established reentry centers in non-regions of our state where inmates coming out of our local jails go through reentry centers before they're released. And what they do in reentry centers is basically some programming, not real extensive programming. It's about a 3-month deal where residential plans, IDs, the basic necessities of what you need before you transition back to our communities.
Sheriffs have to be prepared for any type of emergency in Louisiana.
Sheriffs in Louisiana have to work together. Particularly in the Baton Rouge area, 8 sheriffs have joined forces to create Joint Task Force 7, which is a multi-jurisdictional counter-terrorist task force. JTF 7 was created to protect the greater Baton Rouge area from acts of terrorism, both foreign and domestic. The Mississippi River has reached epic heights in flooding over the last few years. Louisiana sheriffs have worked in particular with JTF 7 in patrolling the river, making sure that the barges and infrastructure and the river is safe. This is very critical because when the water is at a high level and a barge is to break loose from its mooring point, it could cause a catastrophic event with the breaking or breaching of a levee. Ultimately, JTF 7 is responsible for the safety of the people living in the 8 parishes surrounding Baton Rouge. JTF 7 is just one example of how sheriffs work together in Louisiana to keep our communities safe.
Right here in Bossier Parish last year, we had a historic event with the Red River reaching a level it hadn't reached in over 70 years. And so I know on the coast they deal with hurricanes, tornadoes are a big issue, but of course we're most familiar with the flood. But sheriffs have to coordinate. They manage and coordinate with the Office of OEP, the levee boards, the city mayors, the police chiefs, the Corps of Engineers, the Highway Department, the DOTD. Anyone and everyone that's anything in that parish, the sheriff has to ultimately, at the end of the day, coordinate and do what's best for the citizens of his parish.
I've been sheriff for St. John Parish at that time for just over a month. Hurricane Isaac took its toll on St. John Parish. We rescued 6,000 residents without one loss of life. The officers were out there rescuing citizens without hesitation. We thought we had all the answers, but we learned so much more, which has made us better prepared. We now have boats, generators, backup radio systems, we now have resources that are brought in to help us prepare for uniforms, food, shelter, rest for our accommodations for our men and women. We now have transportation. We do now meet with EOC directors frequently and often to make sure we repeat and plan and prepare for the best case and the worst case scenario. So at this point, we learned a lot in Hurricane Isaac. We lost a lot in Hurricane Isaac, but I think we were much better prepared should another emergency response of that sort is needed again.
Hurricanes Katrina and those since have posed special challenges for Louisiana's sheriffs.
In the aftermath of Katrina, obviously no singular agency had the assets or resources necessary to address the challenges that Katrina presented as it related to the destruction of property and flooding and everything else. My office had to reach out to the Louisiana Sheriff's Office Association Task Force in order to backfill and to supplement the workforce that we had. Sheriff's offices across the state really are the only organization where we have the necessary boots on the ground to address emergency response to any particular natural disaster or other types of disasters that are presented. The task force was an outgrowth of that understanding and knowing that they were going to have to backfill at some point in time if the event went 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 days. So Katrina was a good example of the necessity of the LSA task force and being able to backfill, because as I said earlier, no one singular agency has the assets or resources necessary.
Here in St. Bernard Parish for Hurricane Katrina, we wasn't noticed. It went unnoticed. People didn't know for days that we were flooded from levee to levee. Most of the focus was on the city of New Orleans, in which we understand. But our communication system was broken. We didn't even have operability within our own agencies inside of St. Bernard Parish. And today we have interoperability statewide. And that's important to communicate when you have an event such as Hurricane Katrina or those type of events.
Collecting taxes in the parish is another important responsibility of the Louisiana Sheriff.
All sheriffs in the state of Louisiana have the responsibility for collection of some taxes, predominantly ad valorem taxes. In my parish, I actually collect all taxes. There are about 5 or 6 of the sheriffs in the state that collect more than ad valorem tax. So we play a very integral part on the business economic side of what goes on within our respective parishes, whether it is the ad valorem tax, property tax, whether it's sales tax, occupational license tax, and most sheriffs also collect all of the fines and fees that are generated through the court system.
Louisiana sheriffs partner with state and federal agencies to keep the public safe.
Your sheriffs and all the sheriffs in the state of Louisiana have formed the Sheriff Institute. The Sheriff Institute trains all the deputies and themselves how to better do their jobs. That goes from executing the proper search warrants, knowing the proper law, whether to seize cell phones or whether to get a search warrant before they do so. The deputies are on the streets fighting every day to make sure that people are safe in their communities. And every day, new laws are coming out. And the Sheriff's Institute makes sure that not only the sheriff, but the deputies know what these laws are so they can abide by them.
I'm Walt Green, the United States Attorney for the Middle District of Louisiana, and my office has partnered with the Louisiana Sheriff's Association for the last 2 years in educating children of all ages on law enforcement and gun safety. And primarily, the Louisiana Sheriff's Association has been a founding member of the Louisiana Law Enforcement for Gun Safety. Sheriffs are critically important to the DOJ mission here in the Middle District. They're involved in several task forces which are critically important. One is the Human Trafficking Task Force, which they are, of course, a founding member as well, where we fight, prevent, and disrupt human trafficking in this district. Secondly, they're a member of 2 drug task forces, which we disrupt the drug trade, which is also incredibly important here in the Middle District, which we know stems and adds to violence in our district. And lastly, they're one of the founding members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force here in the Middle District too. And again, that mission is to disrupt, discover, and prevent terrorism in the Middle District.
The relationship between the chiefs of police and the sheriffs is a win situation for the public. What's most important is that all police agencies must work together. We all have the same goal, and our goal is protection of the public, the community, and better benefits for law enforcement personnel.
We've worked with the staff of the Sheriff's Association to form partnerships on a number of fronts, legislative, administrative fronts, training fronts, and you know, we've worked a really close relationship over the past dozen years or so.
And we work real closely together, number one, in the protection of the fire and explosion crimes. You know, in our state, we have about 4,000 arsons that occur every year. So our working relationship with the local sheriffs in providing the expertise of law enforcement, and in many cases, these arson investigations that we get into are very, very complicated. You know, and the sheriffs bring to the table a tremendous amount of technology, a tremendous amount of people who can go out and assist our deputies in finding the people responsible for these arsons and putting together a very, very good case.
The public could clearly care less about the color of our uniform or the shape of our badge. They just want to know when they call the police, we're coming. And I think when you look back, especially over the last 8.5 years, and you see what state police is doing, what you see what our sheriffs are doing, what you see what our police chiefs are doing, when you go to whether it's an operation, whether it's a task force, whether it's an investigation, whether it's education within a school system or within the public, you see a deputy sheriff, you see a Louisiana State Trooper, you see us working together like we never have before.
The Louisiana Sheriff's Association, an offshoot of the Louisiana Peace Officers Association, has now known 70 presidents and 4 executive directors. 6 Louisiana Sheriff's Association presidents have gone on to serve as presidents of the National Sheriff's Association. Sheriff N.H. DeBreton, East Baton Rouge. Sheriff Brian Clemens, East Baton Rouge. Sheriff C.A. Griffin, Iberville. Sheriff Gerald Watney, Iberia. Sheriff Don Hathaway, Caddo. And Sheriff Greg Champagne, St. Charles Parish. Lafourche Parish Sheriff Craig Weber also served as NSA president. One sheriff went on to become executive director of the Louisiana Sheriff's Association, Hal Turner. Sheriff Charles A. Fuselier Jr. was selected National Sheriff of the Year by the NSA in 1996. Sheriff Charles Fuselier Sr. and Charles Fuselier Jr. were the only father and son LSA presidents. Sheriff Daniel Edwards, 4th generation of sheriffs, his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Sheriff Gordon Martin, 1964 to 65, and Sheriff Willie Martin, 2003 to 2004, were the only uncle and nephew presidents. Sheriff Gordon Martin served as a delegate in the Constitutional Convention in 1972, where the language was inserted at Sheriff Martin's insistence, placing the sheriff as the chief law enforcement officer of the parish. The history of sheriffs in Louisiana also shows an important legacy.
In Louisiana, sheriffs have a proud tradition. In my family, my great-grandfather was sheriff in 1898 in Tangipahoa Parish. My grandfather, Millard Fillmore Edwards, was sheriff in Tangipahoa Parish from 1928 to 1948. And his son, who was my father, was also sheriff from 1968 to 1980. And of course, I was elected sheriff in 2003, where I'm still sheriff now. So I'm a 4th generation sheriff in Tangipahoa Parish. I know that from the time I was born, both my mother and my father taught all of our children, all of us, you know, that being a public servant is a tremendous responsibility, and it's about helping people.
Community relations is a key component of the office of Louisiana Sheriff.
You got it! Come on! You can do it!
One of our major community outreach programs is Sheriff Safety Town. We've built this building, we built the facades, we built the whole thing using some money from the sheriff's office, but the bulk of it was used came from community support from businesses, individuals, organizations. So we're very proud of not only the results that we've had, but also how it was done. The program works, it's unique in the fact that it's for second graders is the primary focus. And the second graders go through a 2-week safety curriculum in the schools. And then after the 2-week safety curriculum, they come out here for a field trip. This is, although it's fun, it's not a playground, or it's not a park, or it's not something like an amusement ride. It's where they actually learn different things when they're driving the cars and driving the bicycles and walking on the streets. They're learning things, and that's what we're most proud of.
DARE stands for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. When I started teaching DARE in 1990, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have multimedia. We didn't have social media. I had a young guy. He was very quiet. He never said a word. And it came time to write the essay. And he had written his paper. It was about 3 sentences. You're supposed to write, well, it was about 5 sentences. You're supposed to write a whole page. So I went to the teacher and I said, you know, this is really not going to be acceptable. And she shook her head. She said, Deputy, I was deputy at that time. Deputy Stone, you don't understand. This is the first time he has written anything in his school career, ever. He never would write anything. He was in there as a special ed student, you know, an inclusion student. First time he had ever written or attempted to write anything at all. Well, that lets you know what kind of response that you get from the kids there at the school. So very proud of DARE in Louisiana, very proud of all the DARE officers. It's a dedication. It takes a lot of work to go into the schools and teach the DARE program.
We have an opportunity to do some unique things, and I think one of the things that in my office, we identified some areas that I thought was needed in my community, and we formed what I call the Community Service Division. I have 3 ladies that's certified social workers that work in that division. And that particular division houses the FINS program, Families in Needs of Services, the Truancy program, try to make sure the kids stay in school. And they work in those groups. And also they work with the victims of domestic violence.
The sheriff has an awful lot of responsibility. And I think in these times of crime, it's important that the business community work closely with the sheriffs so that we can improve the safety of our school children, so we can help work with the sheriff in a positive way to eradicate some of the bad guys in the bad neighborhoods in our communities.
Primary role of the sheriff is to be responsive to the people that he serves, to listen to the people that he serves, to be as trained as we possibly can to provide those services that our people deserve, and also to help maybe make those youngsters feel positive when they see this star, make them feel positive that this person is not your enemy. This person is going to be somebody I can count on, somebody I can depend on. He is your sheriff.
I'm always reminded of the deputy sheriffs, the men and the women who serve you, who serve us on the front lines for public safety. So while we're talking about specifically the role of the sheriff, it is most important that we not forget how important the role of the deputy sheriff is throughout this process. When we at the Louisiana Sheriff's Association talk to sheriffs about the role of the sheriff, we're very proud to say that the majority of their work is serving the public in many different ways, and ways in which we feel enriched because we get to help people. So I hope you understand that regarding the complexities of this job, and there are many facets of the job, our pride and joy is serving you, the citizens of Louisiana.
The Louisiana Sheriff's Association says it this way: to preserve the office of sheriff as chief law enforcement officer, and to maintain the status of sheriff as professional peace officers. With a cooperative spirit of commitment and energy, the LSA serves all sheriffs throughout the state to bring about effective influences to the communities they serve. For more information, please contact the Louisiana Sheriff's Association.